Hello, I'm Scott Bogey here with Kurt Holobaugh ahead of his UFC fight against Alexander Hernandez on March the 15th. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on the show.
And how has the training been for this upcoming fight?
It's been really good. Really hard, of course.
Yeah,
Putting in a lot of time at the gym, a lot of mat hours, a lot of sparring rounds, a lot of grappling rounds, a lot of wrestling rounds. But it's hard. It's supposed to be hard, but
yeah.
everything's going good.
And how do you feel like Hernandez is going to come out in this fight? Do you feel like he's just going to be a mix of both striking and grappling?
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a little bit of everything. I think he's going to
Yeah,
shoot when he thinks he needs to shoot, and he's going to stand when he thinks he needs to stand. But I think it's going to be a very good fight. Of course, it's going to be a very tough fight. I think we're two high level veterans who's been in the UFC or been fighting for a long time.
yeah.
So it's going to be a fun one.
And you are coming off of that unanimous decision victory. How did you feel like that fight went for you?
I thought the fight went good. Of course, I would like to get the finish,
Yeah,
but I felt like I fought a very tough guy. He's one of the fighting nerds. Everybody
yeah.
raves about that team, and I think he's a really good striker, and that's you know, how the fight played out. It was a striking fight. It was more of a stand-up fight, very little wrestling and ground time. But I thought overall it was a solid performance. It was I put a lot of punches together, a lot of significant strikes. So overall happy with the win, but you always want to get that finish.
You should have got a pair of those glasses as just a reward for getting that victory.
Yeah, I know, right? It was funny because a good friend of mine and a guy I train with a lot, Brendan Allen's gonna grapple
Yeah,
Braulio tomorrow night for
yeah.
karate combat. And you seen Braulio give him some glasses, and you never seen him put them on. I said, "Why you didn't put the glasses on?" He said, "I actually did. They just it was a little bit later." So we kind of talk about it a little bit, but yeah, yeah, some funny dudes.
And do you feel like that just shows like your guys' commitment to the sport? Brent, like you're saying, Alan's fighting tomorrow in a grappling match against in Karate Combat. He just recently fought in the UFC, I think it was like last weekend. It just shows you guys are committed to this and like to stay active.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, um, if I fight Alex on, March 15th and
Yeah.
Karate Combat calls me the next week and says, "Hey, man, we'll pay you some money to come do this grappling match." I mean, hell yeah, man, I grapple every day anyway. So what's the difference? I love competition, and that's why I'm still in this sport till today.
And do you feel like Bryce Mitchell, he was meant to fight on that card and then pulled out because he's also got that fight against Gene Silva? Do you feel like that is just him protecting that fight, or do you feel like he could have still done that if he wanted to?
No, that fight's pretty close, man. That fight's I think it's April 12th in
Yeah,
Miami. So that's not a lot of time to really train, and then you're gonna take time out to go grapple, for karate
yeah.
combat. That's gonna take a couple of days on the road, not really being able to train how you need to train. And like that fight, what is a little over a month out, I believe. So I mean, yeah, it's probably a smart decision, and you don't want to go in and like Brennan just falls. So if he goes in and he gets his ankle popped or
Yeah,
his knee tugged on a little bit, he don't have a fight scheduled. He has some time to clear up. For Bryce, he's fighting in 5 weeks.
yeah.
So basically, if he goes in and hurts his ankle, what does that do to the fight? So it wouldn't shock me if the UFC said, "Look, yeah, we'll give you this fight, but
You
you're
need to
not doing
withdraw.
karate combat."
And how good must it feel when you were able to get that victory against Austin Hubbard to win the Ultimate Fighter?
I mean, there's no feeling that I think can compare to, winning a fight in the UFC for one, but winning the Ultimate Fighter in
Yeah.
the way that I did it. I don't think there's any really feelings that can compare. It's just one of the greatest feelings in the world.
And how was it to be on that show? Because you also had Conor McGregor, who is an icon in the sport, being one of the coaches to being able to help you guys grow. I know you weren't on his team to start off with, but
No, it was extremely fun for me. I loved it. I loved the time being out there. It's one of the things I never take for granted, and I kind of miss it a little bit.
yeah.
That was a very fun time in my life. That was something that I think rejuvenized my fighting career and really jolted me to, want to be a better fighter. And I think being on that show and getting to train with all the coaches we had and all the guys we had on that show really did that for me.
And is it true that there isn't any clocks around, so you don't know what time it is on the show?
Well, say that again.
There's no clocks in like the houses.
Oh, not that I can recall. There might be one like on the stove or something like that. I remember for me, I knew that we wouldn't have no phone or any kind of
Yeah,
communication. So I remember before the show, I went and bought a watch, and I don't wear watches, but I went and bought a little watch just so I know what time because you're always used to picking up your phone and looking at your phone for the
yeah.
time and stuff. I knew I wouldn't have that, so. I remember when we went to Walmart, bought me a little cheap watch just so I could tell the time.
And then how was it after you got that victory against Austin Hubbard? You've got that contract with the UFC again, and then the next fight you get that defeat again in the unanimous decision. Was there any part of doubt that started to cross your mind again, or was it just get me in there? I'm hungry. I want that victory.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, it's part of the sport. It's gonna happen, man.
Yeah,
It's so hard, and you see, like, there's guys that are on big win streaks in the UFC, but those guys are phenomenal, right? But it's almost like sometimes a rare thing because the competition is so stiff in the UFC,
yeah.
and you're gonna win and you're gonna lose. You got to be something very special to have that not happen, and there's very few of them. But no, for me, man, I jumped in. I took a fight against a super tough guy in Trey Ogden. Wound up losing a decision. It wasn't a very crowd pleasing fight. But I was able to call my manager and say, "Hey, man, tell the UFC I want another one quick as ASAP, soon as possible." And they did. So they gave me Krzyzewski, and I was able to get back on a win streak. So I feel good about that now. I still feel like I'm sitting good with the UFC. Um, so yeah.
And is this the last fight on the contract, or have you got still got a few more?
No, actually, I just signed a new contract. So I just signed a new 5 fight contract with the UFC. So yeah, hopefully there's plenty more fights to come after this one.
And that must have been nice to be able to get that five fight deal, get a little bit more security in the UFC.
hmm Yeah, for sure. It's always a good thing, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's great that it's 5 fights. I don't know if some people say, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have signed a 5 fight deal, but I'm happy where I'm at. Um, I'm sitting in a position that when I got released from the UFC the last time, I never thought I'd be sitting back in.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I'm doing this mainly for fun. I'm enjoying this ride, and it's been so much fun for me and my family. So, um, yeah, for me, 5 fight deal is great, and I'm looking forward to fighting all of them.
And what did you make? I know this week I think it was yesterday, there was quite a few releases from the UFC. I think the most controversial one was Taylor Lapis, the French MMA fighter, going 3-1 in his time. That's the second time he's gone 3 wins, one defeat, and been released. What did you make of the release that happened?
Yeah, I actually seen that, and I actually seen a couple of guys that were released, man. And sometimes you hate to see stuff like that, especially when guys you feel like sometimes maybe didn't get a fair shake.
Yeah,
And like the guy you're talking about, yeah, the guy's what 6-2 in the UFC, and he's gotten cut 2 times off
yeah,
of but sometimes this is the thing you never know what it comes down to. You never know what goes on behind the scenes.
yeah,
For him, maybe because normally when the UFC signs you, they sign you to a 4 fight deal. Maybe what it is he fought his 4 fights, and either the UFC chose not to re-sign him, or maybe he wanted more money than what the UFC is willing to give him, and he wants to go shop around. So you never really know. I know another one, a good friend of mine and guy off the show, Roosevelt Roberts, who looks like
yeah.
he just got released. It really sucks because, he had to step up 2 times on short notice and fight two studs of the division. And, it always sucks to see guys, basically, I guess you could say lose their jobs because, that's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
They got to go and they got to find um, uh, fight somewhere else. But yeah, sometimes it sucks to see, man, especially when it's somebody close to you. But as somebody that's been there before, and I've been through it all. I know it's always a way back. It's just guys got to work hard.
And like you're saying with Roberts, he took two guys on short notice. You then also had Jake Hadley. He took a guy on short notice, and after that fight, they've been released. Do you feel like that is starting to put some guys off taking these short notice fights?
Very possible, but you never know because a lot of times you might have guys on the roster and they're on the roster, but the UFC is not necessarily looking to book them. They might even say, "Hey,
Yeah,
look, you're on the roster, but you're a backup." You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? If if we need you, we're gonna call you. And sometimes, like I said, it's a sucky position to be in, but what needs to happen is they need to go out and win one of those fights. That way, the UFC says, "Okay, well now we're gonna start booking this guy." Um, so yeah, man, it like I said, sometimes it's kind of a sucky position, but I definitely think it will hinder some of those guys not to want to take a short notice fight.
And then obviously you get that victory against Hernandez. That is you 3-1 in the UFC. What is next for you? Is it a ranked opponent or who are you wanting to fight next?
Um, I don't really like to ever pick an opponent. I can throw
Yeah,
out some names. I want to fight some of these guys who've been in the UFC for a long time, and I'll go ahead and throw Jim Miller out there. He's a guy that I know he's got a fight coming up with Chase Hooper, I believe. I think it's on the Miami card as well. But yeah, he's a guy, man, that's been around. We got a lot of mutual opponents. I think that we're both a little bit older, so I think that's a good fight. My dream fight's always been Joe Lozon, and he's a guy like that's never been released from the UFC, but like one of those guys that hasn't fought in what I don't know how many years. But that would be an extremely fun fight if he ever wanted to come
yeah,
back. Or I know he's tried to come back a couple of times, and UFC kind of told him they didn't really need him at the moment. And that's what I mean, kind of like you're
he's
on
a
the
backup.
roster, but
Yeah,
you're kind of you're gonna go in when the UFC needs you. But I don't know, man. There's a couple guys, but yeah, the first and foremost, I got Alexander Hernandez, who is no easy task by any
no,
means. He's a freaking monster and been in the UFC for a while and done a lot of good things. So yeah, hopefully I can get the job done against him, and we'll see what's next.
exactly. And the lightweight division is a very stacked division right now. You have Justin Gaethje, who accepted a short notice fight against Fidev. You then also have Beneil that was talked about. You have Dan Hooker, Poirier, Moicano. You just have a lot of killers in your division. Does it just signals the strength of the UFC in particular? It's not just the division, it's just the organization is getting the best of the best fighters.
For sure. I definitely think it's the UFC, and that's what the UFC does. They're the best for the reason. So
Yeah.
if you're the best in the world, that's everybody's goal and dream to fight in the UFC. So, and that's how this works. So it's no surprise that the UFC has that type of roster because they are the best. And yeah, that roster is stacked, especially at lightweight. There's a lot of guys that's been around for a long time. There's a lot of killers in the division. And it's a tough division.
And speaking to the UFC guys, they really say the real thing that puts them different from the other organizations is one, the coverage they get is worldwide, and two, they really take care of you guys. They send you these supplements to help you, and they just give you a lot of opportunities to enhance your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part about it. Is the UFC wanting to be, which they are, the NFL
Yeah.
of fighting. They're the NBA of fighting. They're the major league. So Dana White and the UFC has always built something that's going to always help the fighters, like the Performance Institution and the way they send out the supplements. If you're running low and you getting ready to start a fight camp, or even if you're not in fight camp and you just want some healthy vitamins and stuff like that and some proteins, you just hit the PI up and they send you stuff to your house. So and that's helped me big time as well. Um, so yeah, it's great that the UFC does that, and it helps out.
And what do you make of the champion of the lightweight division, Islam Makhachev? Because obviously some people they like to hate on him, saying he's just fighting featherweights Volkanovski twice. There's then that super fight against Topuria. However, if you think about it, Volkanovski was a killer in the featherweight division. Topuria was a killer, and they had then agreed a short notice fight against Moicano. You can only face who you're given. It doesn't really matter what he wants. If the UFC are saying, I want to fight, you have to fight this guy. If he accepts, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I don't see how anybody can hate on Makachev. I mean, doing what he's had to
Yeah,
do the whole time, and he's beating everybody that the UFC puts in his way, whether it's a featherweight, whether it's a lightweight. You know, he don't care. He's showing up and he's beating all of them, and he don't care if he's taking a fight on a day notice, an hour notice. I don't think that has anything to do with him, who the UFC wants to put against. I personally don't think he cares. He's just he says I'm the champ and I'm going to fight anybody they
yeah.
put in front of me.
And where would you really put him in that GOAT category?
Who's that? Islam?
Islam, yeah.
Um, right now he's the best. Right now he's the best in the world, and he's probably floating up top for pound number one ranking.
And it just shows that that Khabib camp is just producing those killers. You had Khabib who ran that division. He then passed the torch over to Islam, and then you also have Usman, who's doing his thing in
Mhm.
the PFL just now. That looks like set to come in once Islam leaves.
Yeah, for sure. All those guys are super tough, right? All those guys are. And I don't think it's necessarily the way they train, man. It's just the way they were brought up in life. They've came up probably having nothing, and all they've done since they were kids were fight. So it's not a surprise. I mean, you see this a lot in different organizations and in boxing and stuff like that too. But yeah, they're some of the best in the world, and anytime somebody gets matched up with a name that's a Nurmagomedov or Makachev, you know what type of fight you're in for.
And what was it that brought you into this sport?
Just being a fan of fighting. It didn't matter what was on TV when I was a young kid. It didn't matter if it was the Power Rangers or Ninja Turtles. I was sitting in front of the TV watching it because I love to watch fighting. And then I kind of got into boxing back in when Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield were rivals. And then once the UFC came out, that I jumped on board with the UFC. So just being a fan for a long time of fighting.
And when was it that you got that call, knowing that you are going to be on that Ultimate Fighter? Because there was quite a bit of time between your last fight and the Ultimate Fighter series.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a little bit of a layoff, and it was a funny story because I didn't know if I was just going to say, hey, because I own two small martial art gyms. I have a lot of kids that
Yeah.
I train. My kids train. I have a lot of fighters also, pro and amateur, that I always work with day in and day out. So I didn't really know what was next for me because I was in the organization called XFC, and I was in the finals for them where I was supposed to make a pretty good little paycheck to fight that final fight. They wind up going away for a while, so that never happened. So I got a release for them. Signed with Khabib's, promotion Eagle,
Yeah.
and I looked to make my debut there, and never really was able to get a bout agreement done for a fight. And then, I think I was in between fighting for about 2 years. I don't think I had fought. And, my manager hit me up one day and said, hey, bro, I just sent you an application to the Ultimate Fighter. Go fill it out, check it out. Let me know what you think. And I'm like, all right, well, this might be interesting. So let's just see where it goes.
And am I correct in saying it's not just they look at your record, you had to do like an interview as well beforehand?
Yeah, so that's the way it kind of works. Now, the funny thing is, I tried out for Ultimate Fighter years ago, like in 2012. I tried out for the live season of Ultimate Fighter when I was a 4-0 pro. Um, and I actually made it pretty far, but back then you had to fly out to Las Vegas on your own dime, and kind of do your interview in person. This is back before all the social media stuff.
Yeah.
So me and a friend of mine who was a pro fighter also, Thomas Webb, we flew out to Vegas, shared a room and stuff like that, and we did the Ultimate Fighter tryouts. We made it through all the stages, and they don't tell you nothing. They just say, "Okay, well, we'll be giving you a call back." So I'm like, "All right, well, I don't know what that means." So I'll go home for a week or two, and the UFC calls me back, or the Ultimate Fighter called me, and they invited me back out, and they've paid for me to come out and do all the medicals and stuff like that, and do some more interviews and stuff for the Ultimate Fighter, and then they sent me back home again, and I wind up getting a call saying they wasn't going to be able to use me, but I was in like that final selection because it was 32 fighters.
Yeah.
You had to fight your way on the show. So I was very close to getting on the season back then. And then I did this interview. It was just like a Zoom interview. And I talked to a lot of the producers and stuff. And I just really feel like they liked me and liked the type of person, liked the fighter, liked my home life that I have, and I think I was a guy that they wanted to bring on the show.
And how was it when you finally got that Dana White's Contender Series fight?
That was fun too. That was a fun time. I feel like that was before I made it back to UFC the second time, so I already got a
Yeah.
little taste of the UFC. Because um, I only fought one fight in the UFC, so I felt like the UFC let me go way too early because I'm still a young kid. I still don't know what I'm doing at that point. I'm just thrown into the UFC against another Ultimate Fighter vet, Steven Siler, for my very first UFC fight, and very, very fun fight, very entertaining fight for the fans, back and forth. But I wind up losing and the UFC lets me go. So I'm like, man, that sucks. I thought we get like at least three losses in a row before you get cut. But I was able to go back and fight on some regional circuits, fight on some local networks like CBS and stuff like that. And then, yeah, I wind up getting a call to go back to or to the Contender Series for a shot to go back to UFC and wind up winning and got another contract.
And you kind of are like an inspiration story for these fighters who do get released. You got to that UFC, lost, got released. You fought in the Contender Series, got back in, you got released, you fought back in, and you're doing your way now. It isn't the end of the road if you do get released. Just grind it back in the regional scene, and you can get back there.
No, for sure. Just the whole point and the whole thing is just don't ever stop trying. Yeah, you'll know when your time's up. If you're too old to do it, that's one thing. But if you're still young, like I was,
Yeah.
making my way back. Well, even my last time, I was 36 years old when I made it back. So I ain't gonna say too old, but yeah, man, just keep doing what you're doing every day. Don't stop striving to get back there. Take the fights. Don't try to pick your fights. Every time I sign with an organization, they call and say, "Hey, you want this fight?" Yep, I do. Give it to me. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna beat this guy, and I'm gonna be one step closer to going back.
And what do you make of the GFL bringing all these guys out of retirement?
I don't really know yet. I'm thinking the GFL is going to be something like what the league they used to have a long time ago, back when you know, the UFC first started getting
Yeah.
popular. They had some martial arts stuff. What was it?
Like
They had the
the
teams, the IFL or something like that.
yeah.
So I think it's going to be something similar, and I mean it's cool. More leagues, the better for because there's so many fighters. And all the fighters needs a home. Everybody needs
Yeah.
a place that they can go and fight and make a little bit of money because that's one of the whole things about fighting. It's essentially your job, even though you do it for fun sometimes. And I like the idea, to be honest with you, because there's just another place for guys to get signed and go fight. For example, hopefully my boy Roosevelt Roberts can
Yeah.
go get a good deal with the GFL and hopefully make some good money. So yeah, I like it.
And how do you feel like what is your career summed up so far? If you had to go back and just tell your younger self some advice going up, what would you say?
That's a hard one for me because I would probably say, hey, just never give up on some of your dreams. And I
Yeah,
feel like throughout my career, I've never given up. I've moved forward every step of the way, no matter what life threw at me. Slipped all the punches and I kept on going. So, um, yeah, that's the hard one. I don't know exactly what I would say, but I would definitely say, always keep your head up and always move forward.
and it must be good, like you're saying, you've got your own gym set up, seeing these fighters come to it and progress and get and see the level they are going up.
Yeah, for sure. I've got kids in my gym that I've been teaching since they were like 8, 9 years old, and now they're 17, 18 years old, and out there fighting in a cage now and doing very well. So I've watched a lot of young kids actually grow up to be young men. And, and my kid's one of them. He's 14 now, but,
Yeah.
we've been working, mitts and jujitsu and kickboxing since he was 4 years old, too. So it's always a cool thing, man. It's always a cool thing to look back on some photos and see how young some of these kids are and see that they're still with me now. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, maybe I am getting old because it's crazy.
Well, you're still doing great bits in the UFC. You'll be able to get that victory come March the 15th. Thank you for coming on today. Is there anyone you're wanting to shout out or anything else you're wanting to add?
Yeah, man. Let me shout out all my teammates that are showing up day in and day out. Getting these sparring rounds in. Sometimes I know it's a grueling practice. So I appreciate these guys always coming and giving me those rounds. A game. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, man. March 15th. Hope to put on a show.
Exactly, and hopefully you get a nice wee bonus from Dana White as well.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.